Alright, hello everyone. In this video, I'll be giving my more expanded thoughts on the Black Templars. Since last I made a video about Black Templar units, I've actually gotten a couple games in with the Black Templars against my friend Brody, alongside that one combat patrol game I did talk about beforehand, and the solo game I played where I pitted my Black Templars army against my Chaos Space Marine army. But without further ado, we're gonna get into my more expanded thoughts and experiences. So I hope you guys enjoy. My overall thoughts on the Black Templars is that I do really like their army rule of Templar Vows. I have primarily used the accept any challenge, matter the odds vow, and that is due to just in the games I've played so far, either in my solo game where I had my two armies fighting against each other, or against my friend Brody, having that +1 to wound if my melee weapons for my units is equal to or lesser than the enemy unit's toughness is just really good. It's really useful. Straight up awesome. It's also just situationally a matter of like, unless you're fighting Imperial Guard or Sisters of Battle, which are armies where I think the average toughness is 3, you're probably always going to end up taking accept any challenge no matter the odds. So there's that. With regards to the detachments in the Black Templars Codex, I am not a fan of their detachments, which I think is it sucks. It really does suck. Now, that's not to say that they're bad detachments. Like, I want to get that out of the way. I'm not saying Vindication Task Force is a bad detachment. I'm not saying Companions of Vehemence is a bad detachment. I'm not saying any of that. What I'm more getting at is I'm not a fan of how, like, Vindication Task Force as an example. It's very heavy on Ancients. It's cool. Nothing against that. It's just, well, Ancients are kind of whatever, right? Like, points wise, they're inexpensive, but it's more of like, okay, well, what do they do? Yes, the Crusade Ancient, the new Black Templars model, is pretty solid, but you can only, I think, have them attached with a Execrator Chaplain, and the Execrator Chaplain isn't bad, but it's just like, whatnot. With the other detachments, like Wrathful Procession, which is a detachment I did give a try with my solo game, but then ultimately I was like, you know what, this isn't what I want for my Black Templars army. I want to try something else. Not a bad detachment, just I'm not a fan of how, like, kind of niche or in like what specific use cases you may need to use the stratagems. Maybe it just might be me misinterpreting like the proper use cases of their stratagems, but that's how like I look at it. And then Godhammer Assault Force, the transport heavy detachment, not a bad detachment. I'm not going to say it's a bad detachment. I love myself a good Land Raider. But the problem, I think, comes down to it's a detachment that's very heavily reliant on transports. So if you're not doing embark and disembarking stuff a lot with your units, regardless if you're using a Land Raider or not, then you're going to be getting, I'd say, limited value out of the detachment rule. So there's that. And then just general thoughts on the army. They're still Space Marines. So anything that's anti-elite, shooting. So any weapons that are strength 5 or higher, or like high, like good AP, like AP -2 or whatnot, they're going to just start shredding your Marines. That's just kind of how it goes. It's unfortunate. But talking a little bit about more like thoughts on units, and these are the units I've used that are like exclusive to the Black Templars. The Marshal and Castellan combo with Sword Brothers is absolutely insane. Being able to crit on 5s, with lethal hits, re-rolling hit rolls thanks to the Marshal, or no, thanks to the Castellan. It's just great, dude. Like, 4 Sword Brothers plus a Marshal and Castellan, if I remember doing the math right, is 25 Mastercrafted Power Sword attacks, or Power Weapon attacks, all hitting on 2s. You're re-rolling 1s, and you're critting with lethal hits on 5s. That is insane. I think in both games against my friend Brody, I think I on average have like 10 plus lethal hits. So like that, there's a lot of wounds that just kind of like are gonna be in, like end up going through. But like that's a pretty insane combo. Whether you're running the Sword Brothers in units of 4 or units of 5, that's like just that's a blender of a unit. Moving on to the E-Champ, or the Emperor's Champion. I love his model. I really do. Like, I love him as a model. I think his data sheet's really, really good. All that. But from my experience so far with him, man, is he just like, it's kind of like feast or famine with him. It's either he when he gets into melee, when he does get into combat, he just will like really wreck shop, or he gets just put down before he can even get into combat. Now, from my first game of experience with him, like against my friend Brody, he ended up dying before I could do anything with him, and that was namely my fault for mispositioning him as a lone operative. Second game, most recent game, where my friend was playing Emperor's Champion, or Emperor's Children. The E-Champ managed to actually get into combat. He wasn't running lone op. He was actually attached with the Assault Intercessors. They managed to get into engagement with something, get wounds off onto it, but then in the fight back, they just kind of got bodied. But, he's good. Like, I'm not going to say he's bad. Emperor's Champion, definitely strong, definitely solid when he gets into combat. It's just, if he doesn't get into combat, or he is not fighting first, ooh, that feels rough. It feels rough when he gets shot off the board because something gets within lone op range, or if he's attached to a unit, the volume of fire is incredibly high. And then if he gets charged into, it's just kind of like, ooh, he really can't do much into that. You have to kind of like hope and pray that your opponent just misses those hits, fails those wounding rolls, and then your E-Champ just makes those saves. But getting into the experiences, moving into like the total amount of experiences I've had with the Black Templars thus far, I've played one combat patrol game with them. This was back before their codex had released. This was, I think, 1 or 2 weeks before their codex released. I was playing Black Templars. My friend Jack was playing Tyranids. Overall, that was a pretty solid game. There was good back and forth between us two. Granted, it's a combat patrol game, so it's not like dealing with like a bunch of Norn emissaries or whatnot. But I ended up winning that game. Black Templars took the W on that one. Next game was that solo incursion game, solo 2,000 point game I played, where I had my Black Templars army at the time when I was brainstorming it, pitted against my Chaos Space Marine army that I've been using. So Wrathful Procession, Black Templars versus Creations of Bile, Chaos Space Marines. Overall, that game went pretty well. The Black Templars did nearly table my my Chaos Space Marine army, but they ended up losing points wise. So it's kind of whatever. But what that told me was that, hey, my two armies that I have right now at that current time were pretty evenly like matched, I guess you could say, or more like they were very equal to each other. At least that's how it came off to me. But from that game, I did kind of figure out and like learn, like, man, I don't really like Wrathful Procession. I just didn't like how it felt when I was, pitting one of my armies against one of my other armies. So going into the next game, the first game against my friend Brody, he was playing an Annihilation Legion Necron's army that he had put together recently. He wanted to try it out. And I, after making adjustments with my Black Templars army, I switched from Wrathful Procession to Gladius Task Force. Now, I do understand, the irony is not lost on me, that I did say in one of my previous videos that if you're not running a Black Templars attachment, are you really playing Black Templars? And I will say this: Gladius Task Force does allow Black Templars to do more of what they want to do with what Gladius provides, like as a detachment, whether that be for the detachment rule or the enhancements or the stratagems. So with that out of the way, I understand the hypocrisy and the irony of using Gladius Task Force, but I also didn't choose it because it was strong. I chose it because it's also the detachment from Space Marines that I personally have the most experience with. So it was just more like a comfort pick of, well, if I'm going to use any detachment that isn't from the Black Templars that they can use, might as well use Gladius. But moving away from that, that game I ended up losing. That wasn't too much of a shocker, just given the composition of my friend's army, of his Necron army, was very anti-elite, and I just didn't have the firepower, either in melee or in shooting. I just didn't have enough to deal with units. Most of his army, if I remember it right, was strength 6 shooting or melee, and the few things that weren't were like either a lot higher than strength 6 or they were like strength 4, like from like flayed ones. So, and then just because of how many bodies he had on the field compared to me, it just was a matter of board control. I couldn't get to things quick enough. I couldn't get things of his off of objectives quick enough. And even when I could manage to get something closer to stuff, they would either get shot off the board, or if they got locked up into combat, they just couldn't take anything down. They couldn't kill his Scorpec Lords, they couldn't kill his Scorpec Destroyers, they couldn't kill the Locust Destroyers. They couldn't do any of that. It took more effort from me to get stuff out of the way. It also didn't help that I didn't go first, he was going first. So that probably also aided to the whole thing of this is just going to be a rough time. Second game, which we played this on Monday night, was my friend Brody was playing Emperor's Children with Coterie of the Conceited, and I was playing my Black Templars list. With the only adjustment I had made from the previous game being I took my Terminators that I had in my list in that Necrons game, I took them out and replaced them with 2 units of 5 Reavers. Why not? It was my first time using Reavers in a... I wanted to give them a try, see how they fared, either deep striking them in or starting them on the board. Overall, the game went pretty good. I ended up winning. I ended up winning the game, but I can clearly say that from the right off the bat with this match, it was a scenario of good and bad dice rolls. My friend was rolling really poorly with his attacks that he would throw out, like with his units. They either wouldn't hit my stuff, or they wouldn't wound my stuff, or if they did hit and wound, when I would get to rolling for saves, I would just pass them, like all turn 1. Like so I went first. Turn 1, I managed to kill a third of his army. That included, Lucius the Eternal. That included, I think 2 units of his Tormentors. I think 1 Lord Exultant. Like, I killed like a good chunk of his army within the first turn of combat, within my turn 1. And then he rolls over to his turn 1. He does all of his stuff, makes his charges, does his shooting. Maybe I think at most on turn 1, killed like 2 models in like 2 separate units of mine. And then we, going into round 2 on my turn 2, killed another third of his army. It was a situation of like he was rolling really poorly, I was rolling pretty well. It wasn't until battle round 3 on his, I think, turn 3 where things started kind of sort of turning around. Like, I was in the points lead, like I had been in the points lead like most of the match, but just in terms of board presence, I had hardly lost anything. It wasn't until battle round 3 on his turn 3 where I started really kind of like losing things. But even then, like by that point, all he had really left was 2 Demon Princes of Wings. Both of them were pretty low. He had some Noise Marines of a Lord Cacophonist, and he had, I think it was like a unit with 2 Infractors left, led by a Lord Exultant. So it was like, okay, he had like 4 or 5 units left, and I had, I think, like 8 left. Like, I had my 2 Sword Brother units with Castellan and Marshall, Redemptor Dreadnought, 1 of my Repulsor Executioners, 1 of my Reaver squads, and my Lieutenant with Combi Weapon. And just things, like it was a situation where it's like the game was kind of like, we already knew the game was going to end up like, I was going to end up winning, but it was just like, hey, let's see how things like go. Like, let's see, like, what can the Demon Princes do? What can all that do? Ended up being just a situation of my friend, his Emperor's Children, they couldn't survive the fight back. whether it be into the Reavers or into the Redemptor Dreadnoughts, into the Sword Brothers, or the Assault Intercessors. They could get in, they could do their attacks, and then they just kind of like flaccidly would just kind of be there. So, all in all, it was a rough game for my friend. I did also with that kind of give him a bit more insight. It's like, hey, that's kind of just at least from my experience, the feeling of playing Space Marines into some armies where it feels kind of middling at times. But with that, guys, I want to thank you all for watching and listening. I hope you enjoyed hearing my a little bit more expanded thoughts and experiences in the Black Templars so far. Do I intend on making another video like this in the future for the Black Templars? Probably not. At least not right now. Not for the foreseeable future. I do have another video planned in mind in probably shortly after I do this, finish up the recording and editing for this. It's going to be my thoughts on Space Marines versus Space Marines, kind of like just how that feels, the general vibe of like when you have a peer-to-peer kind of conflict or game with two armies. Since I do have some experience with that, having fought Grey Knights and Emperor's Children, and then also pitting my armies together, just what are my observations on that kind of experience. But yeah, but feel free to comment down below what your thoughts are on the Black Templars. What do you think of their detachments? What do you think of their units? Do you have any criticisms or whatnot? And to that end, what kind of experiences have you had playing Black Templars or playing against them? If you have any experience playing them or playing against them, feel free to say something down in the comments. Like always, let me know in the comments if you'd like to see more content like this done later down the road. But once again, guys, I want to thank you all for watching and listening. I want to thank you guys for liking the videos, for subscribing, for sharing them. But with that, I hope you guys are having a great time wherever you may find yourself, whether you're at work, at school, you're on your way home from work or school, or you're at home chilling. Hope you're having a great time, and if things aren't going well, or just they have been going poorly as of late, well, I hope they can turn around and get better. But until the next time, guys, see you next time. Peace.